Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Chapter 4, Verse 34. And this is the Srimad Bhagavatam translated with commentaries by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And we're reading from the 1975 first edition, copyright 1975, and it is available for download, free download, from the website krishnapath.org. These are the Hamsaguhya prayers that Prajapati Daksha is offering to the Lord. Prajapati Daksha is very advanced in devotional service. He's been through, he's had a few lifetimes here where he's made some progress. His first lifetime as Daksha, he offended a great devotee, Lord Shiva. He got a severe reprimand for that. He got his head chopped off and he replaced with a goat head. And then the next life, this is his next life, he realized his mistake. You don't see a transcendentalist materially and make offenses toward them on the material plane, because they're not material. Because they're fully engaged in devotional service to the Lord, they're spiritualized. So Lord Shiva is the greatest Vaishnava. And Prajapati Daksha made that mistake of seeing him externally and was offensive to him. So now in this lifetime, he still has this service. This is toward the beginning of the creation of the universe. He has the service of populating the universe. That's his service. He's been meditating on how to do that as a servant of the Lord. And he's not really satisfied with how it's going. It's not proceeding along in the way that he feels it should. So he's approaching the Lord for the Lord's mercy, to empower him to be able to do his service nicely. He's offering these prayers. They're not his prayers. He didn't make them up. They're in the Vedas. They're called the Hamsaguhya prayers. They're very, very powerful devotional prayers. And the Lord is pleased by what Daksha is doing. He's pleased by these offerings. And that's the path for all of us, really, is to follow in the footsteps of the great realized souls, which is what Daksha is doing. These prayers have been offered by pure devotees, and he is taking advantage of what they are offering. They're showing the way by their prayers and by their service and by their activities. The pure devotees show the way. So the rest of us, we can make advancement on the path by following in their footsteps. And in this case, not imitating, but following their example. In this case, these prayers are being offered. They're very pure devotional prayers. And Daksha is reciting them. Like we have prayers that we recite that are given to us. We don't make them up. The Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. No one made that up. That was given by the Lord himself, Lord Chaitanya. And at first, he empowered this mantra by reciting it in the pure ecstatic mood of separation, in the mood of Srimati Radharani. He was uttering these prayers. And so we take this Maha Mantra from Lord Chaitanya and his disciplic succession. And there are other prayers too, prayers to the spiritual master, prayers to the incarnations, prayers for honoring prasadam. So we're not making these things up. They've been uttered and spoken out of the realization of the pure devotees and the Vaishnavacharyas. And they're there for us to recite also. They've given them to us. These are their wonderful gifts to us. This is part of their mercy. And by reciting these prayers, the Lord is pleased, because we're serving the pure devotees. And that is what pleases Krishna, when we serve the pure devotees. He's very pleased by that. So that's what Daksha's doing. He's reciting these prayers that have been originally recited and given by pure devotees. And now he's reciting them, he's offering them. In that way, he become purified, be able to enter into the mood of loving service that in which those prayers were created. By reciting them, he enters into the mood of them. He gets the mercy. Sometimes I was thinking of these prayers and the Vedas. They're like sheet music. Someone has sung the song from the deep love and realization of their pure heart. They've written it down. And like sheet music, someone picks it up and they sing the song too. Then they can enter into the mood in which the song was presented. So, on the spiritual platform, all talking is singing. All moving is dancing. So these are spiritual, they're songs, they're verses. And these scriptures are like sheet music. So Daksha is taking the song, the prayer that was presented by the pure soul who presented the Hamsaguhya prayers. And he's now singing the song as it was left to be sung. It's great gifts. These are great gifts to have this music available like this. By doing that, we enter into the mood. Even a mundane sense, these songs, they create a certain mood. Popular music, they create a mood. And by hearing them and then singing them or whatever, enter into the mood of the song. So these are spiritual songs. They enter into the mood of love of Godhead by hearing them and singing them, chanting them, reciting them. So Prajapati Daksha continues with these Hamsaguhya prayers. Text 34. This is the prayers. As the air carries various characteristics of the physical elements, like the aroma of a flower or colors resulting from a mixture of dust in the air, the Lord appears through lower systems of worship according to one's desires, although he appears as the demigods and not in his original form. What is the use of these other forms? May the original Supreme Personality of Godhead please fulfill my desires. So the realized soul who is originally uttering the Hamsaguhya prayer, Daksha is reciting it, and now we're also reciting it. We're following in the footsteps by reciting these prayers. You can take a little closer look at it. Try to relish what's actually being said. As the air carries various characteristics of the physical elements. Okay, that's pretty clear. The air carries, the air is the air, it's clean and pure, but it carries different physical elements, particles of other things, like the aroma of a flower, or colors resulting from a mixture of dust in the air. Okay, we got that picture pretty good. The Lord appears through lower systems of worship according to one's desire. That's interesting because in so many of these verses that we've been reading, it's described how the Lord is not perceived through the material senses. He's transcendental, purely spiritual energy. There's nothing material about him. But here, according to one's desires. So those that have material desires, the Lord appears as the demigods, not in his original form. And that is compared to like the air carrying dust and different particles. So the devotee, Daksha, and now us also, we pray, what is the use of these other forms? May the original Supreme Personality of Godhead please fulfill my desires. Prabhupada's commentary. The impersonalists imagine the various demigods to be forms of the Lord. For example, Mayavadis worship 5 demigods, Panchopasana. They do not actually believe in the form of the Lord, but for the sake of worship they imagine some form to be God. Generally, they imagine a form of Vishnu, a form of Shiva, Ganesh, the sun god, and Durga. So this is the Panchopasana. The impersonalists will, in order to achieve their desired goal, they will temporarily focus on these forms. So they imagine a form of Vishnu, a form of Shiva. They don't really believe they exist. They just imagine this form. Ganesh, the sun god, and Durga. It's called Panchopasana. Daksha, however, wanted to worship not an imaginary form, but the supreme form of Lord Krishna. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes the difference between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and an ordinary living being. As pointed out in the previous verse, Sarvam Puman Veda Gunam Chataijo Na Veda Sarva Jnanam Anantam Ide. The omnipotent Supreme Lord knows everything, but the living entity does not actually know the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, quote, I know everything, but no one knows me, end quote. This is the difference between the Supreme Lord and an ordinary living being. An earlier example, in an earlier verse, was how the mind can perceive the senses and is actually directing the activities of the senses. But the senses cannot perceive how the mind is perceiving them. So the living entity, the conditioned soul in relationship to the Lord says, I know everyone, but no one knows me. So a way to understand that is that the mind knows exactly what all the senses are doing, but the senses are not aware of how the mind knows that. In a prayer in Srimad Bhagavatam, Queen Kunti says, quote, My dear Lord, you exist inside and outside, yet no one can see you, end quote. The conditioned soul cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by speculative knowledge or by imagination. It's not possible for the senses to perceive the mind. They don't have that capacity. One must therefore know the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He reveals himself, but he cannot be understood by speculation. The representative of the Lord, the pure devotee, spiritual master, Vaishnavacharya, is a manifestation that we can perceive and we can take guidance from. It's an external appearance. In other words, the Lord is within the heart, but we can't perceive how he is perceiving us and directing everything. But when his pure representative, who is in contact with the Lord, who is engaged in pure devotional service, who is situated on the transcendental platform, is present there before us, we have the good fortune to come in contact with such a soul, then we can get some guidance and we can perceive. So that's the mercy of the Lord. His representative, his pure representative, is his grace, is his mercy. So, what is the Gita verse? Let's try to approach a bona fide spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, render service. He can impart knowledge to you because he's seen the truth. One must therefore know the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why when we address our spiritual master, we say, His divine grace. Whose grace? It's the grace of the Personality of Godhead, Krishna. By the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. His divine grace. His, Krishna's divine grace. Is a spiritual master. It's his divine grace. One must therefore know the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He reveals himself, but he cannot be understood by speculation. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14-29, translation: My Lord, if one is favored by even a slight trace of the mercy of your lotus feet, he can understand the greatness of your personality. But those who speculate to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead are unable to know you, even though they continue to study the Vedas for many years. End quote. This is the verdict of the Shastra. An ordinary man may be a great philosopher, may speculate upon what the absolute truth is, what his form is, where he's existing, but he cannot understand these truths. Sevan mukya hi jivada swayameva sparatyada. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead only through devotional service. This is explained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself in Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Bhaktimam abhijanati yavanyas chasmi tattvataha. Translation: One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is only by devotional service. End translation. Unintelligent persons want to imagine or concoct a form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but devotees want to worship the actual Personality of Godhead. Therefore, Daksha prays, quote, One may think of you as personal, impersonal, or imaginary, but I wish to pray to your Lordship that you fulfill my desire to see you as you actually are, end quote. So the Lord, he says, as they approach me, I reward them accordingly. And we're reading earlier in previous verses that according to the desire of the devotee to relate to the Lord, he manifests in that form. So Mother Yasoda, Nanda Maharaj, they desire to relate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and take care of him and nurture him and appreciate the Lord in his childlike form. And the Lord is very, very happy to reciprocate like that, to accept love in that type of relationship, love and service. The residents of Dwarka, they want to relate to the Supreme Lord with a little more opulence and a little more formality, a little more reverence. And so they see the Lord as an administrator, a ruler, a protector, opulent, wonderful personality for a leader. And the Lord reciprocates. So we were just reading how he even reciprocates with those who have all sorts of material desires, and he appears as the demigods. He manifests these demigod forms, and then it's not him directly, but he provides that form. So that what they're offering to the demigods is really meant for Krishna, but because of their covered over condition and their material desires, it manifests like that. So as they surrender to me, as they approach me, I reward them accordingly. But everyone follows my path in all respects. Because Krishna is the source. Aham sarvasya prabhavam atak sarvam pravattate. Timatva bhajantimam bhuttabhava smanvita. I am the source of all material and spiritual existence. Everything emanates from me. It's all mine. He owns everything, controls everything in different ways. That doesn't mean their living entities don't have individuality and uniqueness. Just because someone is in a superior position doesn't mean that uniqueness and individuality is lost. Sometimes seems that gets confused with rebelliousness. In order to assert myself, I have to get away from any superior authority. I have to become the superior authority in order to be a unique individual. But that's not the case with Krishna. All his parts and parcels are always unique individuals. There's a verse in the Gita, never was a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings are on a battlefield, nor in the future will any of us ever cease to be. We're all unique individuals, and Krishna has a unique relationship with everyone. Is unique. And that never changes. Acknowledging Krishna's superiority simply means you can the living entity can enter into activities, unique, wonderful activities that are not interrupted and embarrassed by the material covering. Birth, death, old age, and disease, and frustration and confusion. They don't have anything to do with that anymore. But it's not that they lose their individuality. Krishna likes the individuality. Variety is the mother of enjoyment. variety is enjoyable. The more variety, the better. The more unique individuals, the better in relationship with Krishna. That actually pleases Krishna. All the uniqueness. It really glorifies Krishna. How magnificent Krishna really is. That there is unlimited variety and uniqueness. It's let the mind try and wrap itself around that. Better just let the mind cooperate and do nice service for trying to find Krishna in all circumstances and how to please Krishna with devotional service. That's a very good engagement for the mind. That's full-time work, forever. Mind doesn't have to worry about job security. The mind will have plenty to do. So mind can feel very secure now. The mind has a lot, always have something to do. The mind will never be bored in trying to see how to engage in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Mayavadi philosopher thinks, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that this verse is especially meant for the impersonalist who thinks that he himself is the Supreme because there's no difference between the living being and God. The Mayavadi philosopher thinks that there is only one Supreme Truth and that he is also that Supreme Truth. Actually, this is not knowledge but foolishness, and this verse is especially meant for such fools whose knowledge has been stolen by illusion. Maya prita jnana. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that such persons, Jnani Manina, think themselves very advanced, but actually they're unintelligent. This is it's all one. When we reach the perfect state of existence, then there are no variegated, there's no variety, it's just all one. There's nothing going on at all. It's just nothing. I don't have my individuality. There is no, God is not a personality. It's just nothing. And that will be very happy to be nothing eternally. No activities, just spiritual energy. So this spiritual energy that the Mayavadis are attracted to, because suffering so much in the material situation, it almost looks attractive. It's not attractive to a devotee at all, but it looks attractive to an impersonalist. And actually, a real impersonalist performs tremendous austerities and penances to attain a state where they can remain in this kind of trance of oneness with the Supreme. It's simply the bodily effulgence of the Lord. It's the rays of his body, the energy he emanates. He has an aura, he has an effulgence. And so they're attracted to that. They don't perceive that there is a form. They just are attracted to the energy emanating from the form, the Brahmajyoti. Actually, this is not knowledge but foolishness, and this verse is especially meant for such fools. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that they think themselves very advanced, but actually they're unintelligent. In regard to this verse, Srila Madhvacharya says, there are three classes of men: the lowest, Adama, those in the middle, Madhyama, and the best, Uttama. Adama, Madhyama, and Uttama. Adama, the lowest, Madhyama, in the middle, and the best, Uttama. The lowest, Adama, think that there's no difference between God and the living entity except that the living entity is under designations, whereas the absolute truth has no designations. So they see that these designations are concocted, American, Indian, Chinese, black, white, rich, poor, fat, skinny, and other designations also. America, China, India, like this. They are concocted. There's nothing eternal about them. They just last for some time. And given those particular constructs, then activities take place around them as if they had some reality or substance. When in fact they come into being, they last for a little while, and then they disappear. Material designations. So they see this. They see that everything is... So then the idea, they jump to the conclusion, because they're mental speculation, they're not hearing from realized souls, they make the conclusion that the Absolute has no designations. That means it's all one. That's the best conclusion someone can come to. That's the highest realization someone can come to just by their own mental observations and understandings. The Acharyas are quick to point out that they think such persons think themselves very intelligent, but actually they're unintelligent. There's way more than that. That's the best they've been able to do by their own mental activities. So that's the conclusion they reach. The lowest, Adama, think there's no difference between God and the living entity, except that the living entity is under designations, whereas the Absolute has no designations. In their opinion, as soon as the designations of the material body are dissolved, the jiva, the living entity, will mix with the Supreme. They give the argument of gata kasa pata kasa. Gata kasa pata kasa. In which the body is compared to a pot with the sky within the sky within and the sky without. Okay. Gata kasa pata kasa is one of their arguments. And they compare the body to a pot. And the sky is within the pot and the sky is without the pot. So it's an empty pot. When the pot breaks, the sky inside becomes one with the sky outside. So the impersonalists say that the living being becomes one with the Supreme. So the body is like a pot. And when one becomes liberated, it's like the pot breaking, and the contents, which are spiritual energy, then merges with the sum total of spiritual energy, just like the sky within the pot merges with the... That's the big argument there. This is their argument, but Srila Madhvacharya says such an argument is put forward by the lowest class of men. Another class of men cannot ascertain what the actual form of the Supreme is, but they agree that there is a Supreme who controls the activities of ordinary living being. Such philosophers are accepted as mediocre. The best, however, are those who understand the Supreme Lord, Satchidananda Vigraha, Puranandadi Gunakam Sarva Jiva Vilakshanam. His form is completely spiritual, full of bliss, completely distinct from that of the conditioned soul or any other living entity. Uttamas tu harim prabhus tarat mayena teshucha. Such philosophers are the best because they know that the Supreme Personality of Godhead reveals himself differently to worshippers in various modes of material nature. They know that there are 33 million demigods just to convince the conditioned soul that there is a supreme power and to induce him to agree to worship one of these demigods so that by the association of devotees he may be able to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, the Adama has a realization that the designations in the material world are all temporary, and therefore he concludes that the forms themselves are temporary, and so he rejects even the idea of form, and that he's under the he has the understanding or the perception that when the form is removed, then everything just merges into one. That originally everything is just all one. So when the manifestation is over, it just becomes all one again. So this is the lowest type of realization. Then the next, the Madhyama, acknowledges that there is a supreme being, but does not actually understand or realize what the form is of that supreme being. And then the Uttama, the highest realization, is that there is the Lord, the source of everything, is form, has form, is not formless. His form is blissful, full of knowledge, and completely distinct from the conditioned souls or any other living entity. And that Supreme Personality reveals himself differently to worshippers in various modes of material nature. Again, as they approach me, as they surrender to me, I reward them accordingly. And they see that these different manifestations of demigods, that Krishna has manifested these different forms to convince the conditioned souls there is a superior power, and to induce him to engage in service. As Krishna says in the Gita, whatever is being offered to others is really meant for me alone, but to at least engage in worship and service, acknowledging the administrators, they're Krishna's administrators, at least that much. And then there's the opportunity, they may come in contact with the Lord's pure representatives, and then they're accustomed to worshiping and serving, then the actual object of their worship and service, they can just transfer all of that over. As Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Matak parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya, quote, there's no truth superior to me, end quote. Aham adir hi devanam, quote, I am the origin of all the demigods, end quote. Aham sarvasya prabhava, quote, I'm superior to everyone, even Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the other demigods, end quote. These are the conclusions of the Shastra, and one who accepts these conclusions should be considered a first-class philosopher. Such a philosopher knows that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord of the demigods, Deva Deveshwaram Sutram Anandam Pranavedina. So what happens is, because of material desires, they can't make the connection properly, because people have material conditioned souls have so many material desires that they can't access this highest philosophical understanding because they're distracted by sense desire for profit, adoration, and distinction. They somehow are thinking these things will satisfy them, make them happy. And so this is a disturbance and distraction. So they may agree to engage in worshiping demigods. Like Krishna's arrangement is that if they can do that, then at least they can get into the habit or become comfortable with offering worship and acknowledging higher powers, and then at some point, because they're already doing that, and find the actual highest power, which is Krishna himself. He's the source of the demigods. But someone who knows that already, and in the verse is praying like that, and Daksha is praying like that by offering this verse to the Lord. And explaining who these, we'll read the verse again. As the air carries various characteristics of the physical elements, like the aroma of a flower or colors resulting from a mixture of dust in the air, the Lord appears through lower systems of worship according to one's desires, although he appears as the demigods and not in his original form. What is the use of these other forms? May the original Supreme Personality of Godhead please fulfill my desires. Go on to text 35. It's a long one. It's combined, 35 through 39. Maybe, since it's such a long... Oh, no. Okay. Well, there's no purport, so it must be just something kind of obvious or descriptive. So we go ahead with it. It's 35. Sukadeva Goswami said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, who is extremely affectionate to devotees, was very pleased by the prayers offered by Daksha, and thus he appeared at that holy place known as Agamarshana. O Maharaj Parikshit, best of the Kuru dynasty, the Lord's lotus feet rested on the shoulders of his carrier Garuda, and he appeared with 8 long, mighty, very beautiful arms. In his hands he held a disc, conch shell, sword, shield, arrow, bow, rope, and club. So he's appearing as Daksha desired, because he's saying like this, the prayers are saying. So he's appearing like this because Daksha wants to see him like this. Daksha's not imagining it. This is the form of the Lord that Daksha is desiring to see. This form exists eternally. In each hand, a different weapon, all brilliantly shining. Conch shell isn't exactly a weapon, although it can be sounded before entering battle. The others are weapons. They're all weapons. His garments were yellow, his bodily hue deep bluish, His eyes and face were very cheerful, and from his neck to his feet hung a long garland of flowers. His chest was decorated with Kaustubha jewel and the mark of Srivatsa. Srivatsa is a little curly hair. It's a curly hair on the chest of the Lord. The residents of Vaikuntha all look like Krishna. They all have same bodily features, except for one thing, this little mark of Srivatsa. I think I got that right. I believe so. On his head was a gorgeous round helmet, and his ears were decorated with earrings resembling sharks. All these ornaments were uncommonly beautiful. The Lord wore a golden belt on his waist, bracelets on his arms, rings on his fingers, ankle bells on his feet. Thus decorated by various ornaments, Lord Hari, who is attractive to all living entities of the three worlds, is known as Purushottama, the best personality. He was accompanied by great devotees like Narada, Nanda, and all the principal demigods, led by the heavenly king Indra, and the residents of various upper planetary systems such as Siddhaloka, Gandharvaloka, and Charanaloka. The Lord never appears alone. Situated on both sides of the Lord and behind him as well, these devotees offered him prayers continuously. Krishna. I'm just remembering sometimes in a fire sacrifice, when there's an initiation sacrifice, the sacrificial arena in the temple is arranged, and there's very nicely, there's decorations, and there's coconuts placed in four corners of the arena, and there are flags, and the fire is set up, and the ghee is there, and then the priest comes and he'll chant the mantras to officiate over the ceremony. But also there is a lot of glorification and chanting going on around the sacrificial arena. There usually are at least 4 Brahmins, one on each end, and they're all reading, but they're not reading together. They're reading separately, and they're glorifying the Lord. They're reading from Bhagavatam, they're reading from Gita, maybe Chaitanya Charitamrita, the different Vedic scriptures they're reading from. And other devotees are chanting japa, and someone else may be singing a kirtan, or there may be a small bhajan or something going on. And all this glorification is going on simultaneously. Because Krishna will be appearing in that arena of sacrifice. He will be appearing there to accept the initiates. So here we're seeing there's a lot going on around Krishna. It's quite a crowd. Narada, Nanda, all the demigods, the main demigods, led by Indra, residents of upper planetary systems, the Siddhas, the Gandharvas, the Charanalokas. They're on both sides of the Lord and behind him. And they're all offering him prayers continuously. This is the vibration that surrounds the Lord. In his other manifestations, his other appearances, as Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead in his original form, Shama Sundar, the flower garland that he wears is very often surrounded by bees buzzing and humming. So these are the different devotees and his servants, main servants. They're very interested when Krishna appears in the material world. They like to know what's going on. They're very attracted. And if Krishna kills a demon in the material world. They come in their airplanes and they're very excited to see this. They shower flowers. They offer prayers. So this is the vibration that is accompanying the Lord. There's a lot going on. And it's very variegated. The prayers the Siddhas are offering are a little different from the prayers the Gandharvas are offering, and the Charanas, and a little different from the prayers Narada is offering. It's all going on simultaneously. This wonderful vibration, this wonderful sound vibration. And it's very pleasing to the Lord. So he appeared there, and he was pleased. He was pleased with Daksha's prayers. He's pleased with the prayers of all these personalities accompanying him, and he was attracted to Daksha's prayers. So he came there. So now Daksha is also entering into the activity of offering all these prayers. Daksha's now become one of the crowd. He's one of the group now. Daksha's offering prayers. Text 40. Seeing that wonderful and effulgent form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prajapati Daksha was first somewhat afraid. But then he was very pleased to see the Lord, and he fell to the ground like a stick, dandavat, to offer his respects to the Lord. Yeah, it's a little overwhelming. It's overwhelming. It's fear. Fear that he was afraid, somewhat afraid. So fear, he was feeling challenged. Why would you feel fearful? That someone was going to hurt you? Or that he had been doing something wrong? Or maybe he was afraid that the Lord wouldn't accept him. Now that the Lord was actually here, that he maybe had some impurity or some frailty that would make him unacceptable to the Lord. Perhaps that was more his fear. But he soon gave that up. He was pleased to see the Lord. He fell to the ground like a stick to offer respects to the Lord. 41. As rivers are filled by water flowing from a mountain, all of Daksha's senses were filled with pleasure. Because of his highly elevated happiness, Daksha could not say anything, but simply remained flat on the ground. Yeah, he's drowning in the ocean of ecstasy. As rivers are filled by water flowing from a mountain, all of Daksha's senses were filled with pleasure. His senses were purified. So he's completely open to receiving all the mercy coming from his darshan with the Lord. He just remained flat on the ground. Commentary, purport by Prabhupada. When one actually realizes or sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's filled with complete happiness. For example, when Dhruva Maharaj saw the Lord in his presence, he said, Swamin kritar tosmi varam nayache. Quote, my dear Lord, I have nothing to ask from you. Now I'm completely satisfied, end quote. Similarly, when Prajapati Daksha saw the Supreme Lord in his presence, he simply fell flat, unable to speak or ask anything, or ask him for anything. You wanted something? And then the devotee realizes, all I really wanted was you. I really don't want anything else. I want to serve you. I want to be with you. I don't want to be distracted. And so the Lord appears. Yes, you wanted something? No. Like that happened to Sudama Brahman. He was in Gurukul with Krishna. Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. He was one of Krishna's classmates, and they were very close. They were very friendly as students in the Sandipani Muni's ashram. And later on, when Krishna assumed his post of administrator, went to Mathura, and then became the king in Dwarka, and was living very opulently and majestically in the royal order. Sudama Vipra, Sudama Brahman, he was living as a Brahmin, very renounced, with practically nothing to live. And his wife was coaxing him, "Oh, my dear husband, we live as householders. We need to have some things as householders." And she was suffering quite a bit. Not even having clothing, was very ragged. Just preparing meals was impossible. There was nothing to cook. It was very difficult. Perhaps a sage in the forest, living alone, renunciate, can do that. But they were householders. And he had that responsibility toward his wife. So she suggested that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you're very close with him. He'll help you. You're a Brahmin. You can approach the Kshatriya for charity. You can do that. And you should do that. Please go. And you're a Brahmin. You can approach Krishna. So he really didn't want to, but he could see that it was not going against any religious principles or anything. And he was actually kind of excited and happy to think that he's going to see his old friend Krishna. And he knew he should bring something to offer to Krishna. And the only thing they could come up with was some little broken chipped rice. So he had that in a little sack. And he got to Krishna. And he didn't even want to ask anything from Krishna. He forgot to even ask. He didn't even ask. He was just so happy, so ecstatic to see Krishna again, his old friend. And Krishna was so happy to see him. Treated him like royalty because they had this loving relationship. And the Brahmin loved Krishna, not for anything. He was his childhood friend. But when he returned home, he noticed that all opulence had been supplied. He didn't even recognize his residence. It had been turned into very, very opulent. His wife was dressed beautifully. They had everything beyond anything could imagine, everything they needed. There was no more difficulty for them with the basics. But in the presence of the Lord, he didn't even think to ask anything. He was fully satisfied. So that's the same with Daksha. And also Prahlad Maharaj, in the presence of Nrsimhadev, doesn't want to ask anything. Dhruva Maharaj, he was full of desire. He wanted a kingdom, he wanted this, he wanted that. And then he saw Krishna and he's like, oh, I don't want those things. He ended up with them anyway, but certainly wasn't on his top priority on his list of things that he wanted. Hare Krishna.